In a ballroom filled with 100 princesses, the Alpha King noticed the only girl kneeling on the floor. Clara Whitmore kept her head lowered as she scrubbed dark red wine from the marble beneath the chandeliers of Blackthorn Palace. The stains spread like spilled rubies across the white stone, soaking into the rag clenched in her trembling hands while music drifted through the enormous ballroom above her like something from another world. Around her, servants rushed in every direction carrying silver trays, steaming platters, crystal glasses, and towers of glowing candles, while noble guests flooded through the golden doors of the palace in gowns worth more money than Clara would earn in 20 years. Tonight was the Royal Moon Ball, the night every unmated princess across the Northern Territories had dreamed about since childhood. 100 royal daughters had traveled hundreds of miles through snowstorms, mountain passes, and frozen forests for a single reason. Alpha King Lucien Blackthorn was finally choosing a Luna. "Move faster, Omega," snapped the head housekeeper as she passed by Clara in a cloud of perfume and irritation. "If the princesses see stains on the floor, they'll blame the servants." Clara quickly nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Her voice barely rose above a whisper. It always did that around nobles, around powerful wolves, around anyone who reminded her what she was. An Omega. Weak. Replaceable. Invisible. She dipped the rag into the bucket beside her and scrubbed harder, ignoring the ache spreading through her fingers from the icy water. Somewhere high above the ballroom, thunder rumbled beyond the castle towers, shaking the tall stained-glass windows as winter winds howled outside. But inside Blackthorn Palace, everything glowed gold and silver beneath candlelight. Princesses entered one after another like living jewels. Some wore dresses embroidered with diamonds that flashed every time they moved. Others arrived draped in white furs from northern packs or silk gowns from southern kingdoms. Their laughter echoed across the ballroom, while noblemen bowed and musicians played softer, sweeter songs for each new arrival. Clara tried not to stare, but it was impossible not to notice them. Beautiful girls with perfect posture and powerful scents that filled the air like expensive perfume. Alphas, betas, royal bloodlines stretching back centuries. Everything Clara was not. "I heard the king already rejected 37 marriage offers," one princess whispered loudly near the staircase. "He even turned away the daughter of the Crimson Fawn Kingdom." Another laughed softly behind her jeweled fan. "Lucien Blackthorn is impossible to please. They say his wolf barely tolerates anyone near him. I heard he's dangerous. I heard he's cursed. I heard he's never looked at a woman twice." Clara lowered her gaze again, focusing on the floor. She had never seen the Alpha King herself, only heard stories whispered by servants in the kitchens late at night. Stories about silver eyes sharp enough to silence entire rooms. Stories about a king who ruled like winter itself. Cold, untouchable, merciless. Some servants claimed he could smell fear from 30 feet away. Others swore his wolf had once made seasoned warriors collapse to their knees without saying a single word. Clara didn't know what was true. She only knew servants weren't supposed to be noticed by men like him, especially not Omega servants. "Careful, girl." A sharp voice suddenly sliced through the ballroom. Clara barely looked up before someone slammed into her shoulder. The bucket beside her tipped over instantly, icy water splashing across the marble floor and onto the hem of a pale blue gown. Silence crashed down around them. Clara froze. Her stomach dropped. Slowly, painfully slowly, she lifted her eyes toward the princess standing above her. The woman's blonde curls framed a face twisted in disgust as water dripped from the expensive silk pooled around her feet. "You ruined my dress," the princess said coldly. Clara's throat tightened. "I am sorry, Your Highness." "Sorry." Another noblewoman laughed nearby. "These palace servants should be trained better." "She's an Omega," someone muttered with clear disdain. "What else would you expect?" Heat flooded Clara's face. Every pair of eyes near the staircase turned toward her now. Nobles, guards, servants. The princess stepped closer, forcing Clara backward onto her knees. "Look at me when you apologize," she demanded. Clara slowly raised her head. Her pulse hammered painfully against her ribs. "I'm sorry," she whispered again. The princess studied her for a long moment before scoffing. "Pathetic." Soft laughter spread through the nearby crowd. Clara stared down at the marble again, wishing the floor would open beneath her feet, wishing she could disappear before the humiliation burned any deeper into her chest. Then suddenly, without warning, every sound inside the ballroom vanished. The music stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the servants froze. Clara frowned slightly. Something had changed in the air. A pressure. Heavy. Electric. Dangerous. It swept through the ballroom so fast her lungs almost forgot how to breathe. One by one, nobles stepped backward. Guards straightened instantly. Princesses lowered their heads. Clara felt it before she saw him. The Alpha King had entered the ballroom. And somewhere across the massive golden hall, hidden beyond crowds of royal guests and flickering candlelight, Lucian Blackthorne stopped walking. Because for the very first time all night, he had caught the scent of someone he could not ignore. The air inside the ballroom shifted the moment Lucian Blackthorne entered. Clara felt it like cold lightning racing across her skin. Every instinct inside her screamed to lower her eyes immediately, yet somehow she could not move. Noblemen straightened their jackets. Princesses adjusted sparkling gowns and tilted their chins higher, each one desperate to appear flawless beneath the golden candlelight. Even the musicians near the marble staircase fell silent for half a heartbeat before resuming a slower, softer melody. Clara remained frozen on her knees beside the overturned bucket, her fingers still wrapped tightly around the soaked rag. She could hear the king's footsteps now. Slow, steady, heavy enough to command the entire room without a single word. The princess standing above Clara instantly stepped backward and lowered her head respectfully. "Your Majesty," she breathed. Clara swallowed hard. She had spent years hearing stories about the Alpha King, but none of them prepared her for the pressure of his presence. It pressed against the ballroom like an approaching storm. Every breath felt smaller, harder, warmer. Then she finally saw his boots stop only a few feet away from her. Black leather polished like obsidian. Silence stretched painfully through the ballroom. Clara lowered her gaze immediately, staring at the reflection of chandeliers trembling across the wet marble floor. Who spilled this? His voice was deep and calm, yet every person in the ballroom reacted instantly to it. Clara's stomach twisted. The blonde princess spoke quickly before Clara could answer. "The servant ruined my gown, Your Majesty." Clara expected anger, punishment, dismissal. Instead, another silence followed. Strange, heavy, almost thoughtful. Clara could feel his eyes on her now, and somehow that felt far worse than being yelled at. "Look at me." The command was quiet. She obeyed before her mind even caught up. Slowly, Clara lifted her eyes toward the Alpha King for the first time. The stories had not exaggerated him. Lucian Blackthorne looked less like a man and more like something carved from winter itself. Tall enough to tower over everyone near him, dressed entirely in black, with dark hair falling carelessly across his forehead and silver eyes sharp enough to stop her breathing. But it was not cruelty Clara saw there. It was confusion. Intense and dangerous confusion. The king stared at her like he recognized something impossible. Clara's pulse hammered so loudly she could barely hear the music anymore. "You are trembling," Lucian said softly. Heat rushed into Clara's cheeks. "I am sorry, Your Majesty." "For what?" She blinked in surprise. No one had ever asked her that before. Around them, whispers spread through the ballroom like wildfire. The princess beside Clara forced a nervous smile. "Your Majesty, perhaps we should continue the introductions. Princess Eleanor traveled over 600 miles from the western coast to meet you tonight." Lucian did not even glance at her. His silver eyes remained fixed entirely on Clara. Then his gaze dropped lower toward her hands. Clara quickly realized one of the broken crystal pieces near the bucket had sliced across her palm while she cleaned. A thin line of blood stained the rag between her fingers. Before she could hide it, Lucian stepped forward. The entire ballroom seemed to stop breathing. Clara's own breath caught as the Alpha King crouched slightly in front of her. A king kneeling near a servant should not have looked natural. Yet somehow, with Lucian Blackthorne, it did. His hand reached toward hers carefully, slowly enough not to frighten her. The moment his fingers brushed against her skin, Clara felt warmth rush violently through her chest. Not pain, not fear. Something older, deeper, like moonlight flooding through frozen water. Lucian's jaw tightened instantly. His eyes darkened with something wild and unreadable. The air around them suddenly felt charged. Dangerous. Clara pulled her hand back in panic, her heart racing uncontrollably now. She heard several princesses gasp nearby. One noblewoman whispered sharply. The king touched an Omega servant. Lucian rose to his full height again without looking away from Clara. For one terrifying second, the silver in his eyes almost seemed to glow beneath the chandeliers. Then somewhere high above the ballroom, thunder shook the castle windows again. And deep inside Lucian Blackthorn, the wolf he had controlled for years finally began to wake. Lucian Blackthorn had stood before queens, warriors, and royal bloodlines without his wolf reacting even once. But the frightened Omega servant kneeling on the ballroom floor nearly shattered years of control in a single touch. Clara felt it immediately. The atmosphere around the Alpha King changed so suddenly that every instinct inside her screamed danger. His shoulders stiffened beneath the black coat draped across his broad frame, and the silver in his eyes sharpened into something almost animal. The nearest nobles stepped backward without thinking. Even the princesses who had spent the entire evening competing for his attention suddenly looked uncertain now. Clara lowered her gaze quickly, her breathing uneven. She should not have let him touch her. She should not have looked directly into his eyes. Nothing about this felt right. We're safe, Your Majesty, one of the royal advisors asked carefully from near the staircase. Lucian did not answer immediately. His attention remained fixed on Clara as if the rest of the ballroom no longer existed. Somewhere deep beneath the layers of perfume, candle smoke, and winter air drifting through the castle windows, her scent still lingered around him. Soft, warm, impossible to ignore. His wolf recognized it instantly. Mine. The word struck through Lucian's mind so violently that his jaw tightened. No. Impossible. He had spent years avoiding mating bonds, royal alliances, and every political trap disguised as romance. Yet now his instincts were reacting to an Omega servant kneeling barefoot beside spilled wine and shattered crystal. Lucian. The sharp female voice cut through the tension. Princess Vivienne of Eastmere stepped gracefully forward through the crowd, her silver gown glittering beneath the chandeliers. She smiled with practiced elegance while every noble woman nearby watched closely. The first dance is waiting for you, Your Majesty. Clara immediately tried to pull herself farther back toward the servants' corridor, desperate to disappear before anyone blamed her for this strange moment. But Lucian noticed instantly. Stay where you are. The command stopped her cold. Several nobles exchanged shocked looks. Servants were never addressed directly by the king during royal ceremonies. Clara's heart pounded painfully as she remained frozen beside the overturned bucket. Princess Vivienne's smile flickered slightly. Your Majesty, she said carefully. Surely the servant can be handled later. Lucian finally looked away from Clara. The entire ballroom seemed to relax the moment his attention shifted. But his expression toward the princesses remained distant. Controlled. Empty. I am not interested in dancing tonight, he said calmly. Silence followed. The rejection landed heavily across the ballroom. Several princesses lowered their eyes in embarrassment while whispers spread through the crowd once again. Clara could practically feel the tension thickening around her. Then suddenly another servant hurried toward her from the edge of the ballroom. Clara, the older woman hissed under her breath, panic filling her eyes. Come now before you cause more trouble. Clara nodded immediately and reached for the bucket with shaking hands. But as she stood, the slippery marble beneath her shoes betrayed her. Her balance shifted. The broken crystal piece near her foot slid sharply across the floor. Clara stumbled forward before she could stop herself. A soft gasp escaped the crowd, but she never hit the ground. Strong hands caught her instantly. Warmth surrounded her before her mind could even process what happened. Clara froze completely. So did the ballroom. Lucian Blackthorn was holding her against his chest, one arm steady around her waist, the other braced protectively at her back. Time itself seemed to stop beneath the chandeliers. Clara could hear nothing except her own heartbeat. Fast, frightened, wild. The Alpha King stared down at her with an intensity that stole the air from her lungs. Up close, his silver eyes looked almost unreal beneath the candlelight. Not cold now, burning. Clara realized with sudden horror that everyone in the ballroom was staring at them. Princesses, nobles, guards, servants. No one moved. No one even breathed. Then somewhere near the staircase, a woman whispered the words that shattered the silence completely. The king's wolf has chosen. The ballroom erupted into whispers so fast it sounded like wind tearing through dry leaves. Clara immediately stepped backward out of Lucian's arms, her face burning with panic as every noble in Blackthorn Palace stared directly at her now. She could barely breathe beneath the weight of their attention. No, one princess whispered sharply. That is impossible. An Omega servant, another scoffed. The king would never choose someone beneath royal blood. Clara wished the marble floor would swallow her whole. Her hands trembled violently as she lowered her gaze again, trying to steady her breathing. But it was impossible when the Alpha King still stood only inches away from her. She could feel the heat of his presence like fire against Winter's skin. Lucien remained completely still. Too still. His wolf was restless beneath the calm mask he wore for the kingdom. Every instinct inside him focused entirely on the frightened girl standing before him. The scent surrounding Clara had grown stronger after he touched her. Moonlight and snowfall. Warmth beneath cold air. Ancient. Familiar. Dangerous. Somewhere deep in his memory, his wolf recognized it. Princess Vivian stepped forward again, determination hardening her elegant features. "Your Majesty," she said carefully, though irritation leaked beneath her polished voice. Surely this misunderstanding should end before rumors spread further. Lucien slowly turned his silver eyes toward her. The temperature in the ballroom seemed to drop instantly. "Rumors," he repeated calmly. Vivian forced a smile. "The court is already speaking nonsense. They heard one foolish servant mention a mating bond." Clara flinched at the words. Mating bond. The phrase echoed painfully inside her chest. Impossible. Nothing about this could be real. She was nobody. A servant. An omega hidden in palace kitchens since childhood because nobles disliked weak wolves near royal courts. Lucien Blackthorne could have any princess in the Northern Territories. Why would his wolf react to her? "There is no misunderstanding," an older voice suddenly said from near the royal balcony. The ballroom parted instantly as an elderly woman stepped forward in dark silver robes embroidered with crescent moons. Clara recognized her immediately. High Seer Evelyn, the royal oracle. Fear curled tightly inside Clara's stomach as the woman approached. Evelyn's pale eyes studied Clara with unsettling intensity. Then her gaze shifted slowly toward Lucien. "Your Majesty," she said softly, "when was the last time your wolf reacted this strongly?" Silence answered her question. Because everyone in the kingdom already knew the truth. Lucien Blackthorne's wolf trusted no one. Not since the death of his parents. Not since years of betrayal, assassination attempts, and political games turned the Alpha King colder than winter stone. Yet now the entire ballroom had watched his wolf surface because of a servant girl. Princess Vivian's composure cracked slightly. "With respect, Seer Evelyn, she is an Omega Maid." "I can see that," Evelyn replied calmly. "Can you?" The princess fell silent. Clara's pulse pounded harder. She suddenly became painfully aware of how plain she looked standing among queens and princesses. Her simple gray servant dress, her damp sleeves, her loose brown hair falling from its pins after hours of work. Nothing about her belonged inside this ballroom, especially not beside the king. "Clara." The sound of Lucien saying her name nearly stopped her heart. She looked up before she could stop herself. His silver eyes locked onto hers again, steady and unreadable. "Did anyone teach you court protocol?" Clara blinked nervously. "And no, Your Majesty." "Then listen carefully." His voice lowered slightly, quieter now, yet somehow even more dangerous. "No one speaks to you disrespectfully while you stand beside me." The entire ballroom froze again. Clara stared at him in complete shock. Nearby, one princess accidentally dropped her champagne glass onto the marble floor with a loud crack. Nobody even looked at it. Because every person inside Blackthorne Palace understood exactly what the Alpha King had just done. He had publicly protected her. And in royal courts, that meant everything. Clara could still feel hundreds of eyes following her as she hurried through the servants' corridor behind the ballroom. Her breathing shook unevenly while the sounds of music and noble conversation faded behind heavy palace doors. She moved quickly, clutching the front of her dress with trembling fingers as if it could somehow stop her racing heartbeat. Nothing felt real anymore. Not the way the Alpha King had looked at her. Not the way he had spoken her name in front of the entire court. And definitely not the way his wolf reacted whenever he touched her. "Clara." She flinched at the sound of her friend Miriam whispering from beside the kitchen entrance. The older servant grabbed her wrist gently and pulled her into the quiet pantry room away from passing guards. "What happened out there?" Clara shook her head immediately. "I do not know. The entire ballroom is talking about you." "Please do not say that." Clara pressed a hand against her forehead. "I just want a night to end." Miriam studied her carefully. "The king protected you." Clara's chest tightened painfully. "That is exactly the problem." Outside the pantry walls, servants rushed through the corridors carrying trays and fresh flowers, while whispers spread faster than wildfire across Blackthorn Palace. Every servant in the castle already knew the impossible rumor. The Alpha King had ignored 100 princesses for an Omega Maid. Clara leaned weakly against the wooden shelf behind her. "They are going to send me away," she whispered. "Or worse." Miriam frowned. "Lucian Blackthorn does not look at people the way he looked at you unless it matters." Clara lowered her gaze. That frightened her more than anything else. Because deep inside, a tiny part of her had felt it too. The strange warmth. The pull. The terrifying feeling that something ancient had awakened the moment his hands touched hers. Before Miriam could speak again, footsteps echoed outside the pantry door. Heavy, slow, familiar. Both women froze instantly. Then the door opened. Lucian Blackthorn filled the doorway like a living shadow beneath the dim hallway lanterns. Clara's breath caught painfully in her throat. Miriam immediately bowed her head and backed toward the far wall. "Your Majesty." Lucian barely acknowledged the servant. His silver eyes locked directly onto Clara again. The same impossible tension from the ballroom instantly returned, thick enough to steal the air from her lungs. "Come with me," he said quietly. Clara blinked in shock. "Your Majesty?" "Now." His voice remained calm, but beneath the calm, she sensed something strained, controlled too tightly. Miriam looked terrified now. Clara slowly nodded before following Lucian out of the pantry and into the quieter palace corridors. Neither of them spoke for several moments. The farther they moved from the ballroom, the quieter the castle became until only the sound of rain tapping against tall windows filled the silence between them. Finally, Lucian stopped beside an open balcony overlooking the moon gardens below. Cold winter air drifted inside, carrying the scent of snow and roses. Clara remained, several feet behind him, afraid to stand too close. Lucian rested one hand against the stone railing, his broad shoulders tense beneath the black fabric of his coat. "Why are you afraid of me?" Clara stared at him in surprise. "Because you are the Alpha King. That is not the real reason." His silver eyes shifted toward her again. Clara's pulse stumbled. She swallowed hard before answering honestly. "Because when you look at me, it feels like everything is changing." Silence followed her confession. Not uncomfortable silence. Something heavier, softer. Lucian studied her carefully beneath the pale moonlight spilling through the balcony archways. Then his gaze slowly lowered toward the silver chain hidden beneath the collar of her servant dress. Clara instinctively stepped backward. Too late. He had already seen it. A small crescent moon pendant resting against her skin. The moment Lucian saw the symbol, something dangerous flashed across his face. Recognition. Real fear. And for the very first time that night, the Alpha King looked shaken. Lucian's eyes remained fixed on the crescent moon pendant resting against Clara's throat as thunder rolled softly beyond the palace towers. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Clara instinctively wrapped her fingers around the necklace, hiding it beneath the collar of her dress again. "Where did you get that?" Lucian asked quietly. His voice had changed. Lower now. Sharper. Clara swallowed hard. "It belonged to my mother." "Your mother's name?" She hesitated. "Rosalind Whitmore." Something unreadable crossed Lucian's face. The cold mask he wore before the kingdom slipped for only a second, but Clara noticed it immediately. He knew something. "You recognize it," she whispered. Lucian looked away toward the moon gardens below. Snow had begun falling lightly over the dark roses and frozen fountains beneath the silver sky. That symbol belonged to the Moonvale bloodline. Clara frowned softly. "I have never heard that name before. Most people have not." His jaw tightened slightly. "Because the royal court erased them years ago." Fear curled inside Clara's chest again. "Why?" Lucian remained silent for several seconds. Before answering, the Moonvale wolves were feared. Their blood carried abilities tied to ancient mating bonds and lunar magic. Clara blinked in confusion. Magic? Not the kind from stories. Lucian's silver eyes shifted back toward her. Their wolves could calm rage, heal broken instincts, strengthen weakened bonds. Clara's heartbeat slowed painfully. Suddenly, small fragments of memory returned to her. Her mother placing the pendant around her neck when she was very young. The warning whispered against her hair afterward. "Never let the nobles see this. Never tell anyone what you are." Clara's fingers tightened around the necklace. "My mother died when I was 12. Lucian watched her carefully. "How?" "Fever." The word came quietly. "At least that is what the servants told me." Something dark flickered behind Lucian's eyes again. Before he could respond, Hurried footsteps echoed through the corridor behind them. A royal guard appeared moments later and immediately bowed his head. "Your Majesty." Lucian straightened instantly, the king returning to his posture like armor sliding back into place. "What is it?" "The council is demanding your presence in the ballroom immediately." The guard hesitated uneasily before continuing. "There are concerns spreading among the royal families." Clara's stomach dropped. Of course there were. Lucian glanced once toward her before turning back to the guard. "I will handle it." The guard bowed again before disappearing down the corridor. Silence returned between them. Clara stepped backward slightly. "I should go." Lucian's expression hardened immediately. "No." The single word froze her in place. "Your Majesty, you are not safe alone tonight." Clara stared at him in disbelief. "Why would anyone care about me?" Lucian moved closer now, slow enough not to frighten her. "Because every royal family inside that ballroom just watched my wolf react to you." Clara's breath caught. Hearing him say it aloud made everything feel even more real, more dangerous. "I do not understand any of this," she admitted softly. Neither did Lucian. That was the problem. His wolf had recognized her instantly. Not simply attraction, not curiosity. Recognition. Ancient and absolute. It should have been impossible. Yet the closer he stood to Clara, the harder it became to ignore the truth growing inside him. Then suddenly Clara's necklace slipped free from her fingers again as she stepped backward. The crescent pendant caught the moonlight directly this time. And beneath the silver glow, faint markings began appearing against Clara's skin. Delicate lines of pale light spreading slowly along her collarbone like living moonlight beneath water. Clara gasped softly and grabbed at her throat in panic. Lucian's silver eyes widened instantly, because he recognized the markings. The Moonveil bond seal, a symbol that only appeared when fate itself awakened. Clara stared down at the pale silver markings spreading slowly across her skin, her entire body trembling beneath the moonlight pouring through the balcony arches. The glowing lines curved delicately along her collarbone like living frost, beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "What is happening to me?" she whispered. Lucian stepped closer immediately, his expression sharper now than she had ever seen it. "Do not panic." "How can I not panic?" Clara pressed a shaking hand against the glowing marks. "My skin is glowing." Fear rose visibly in her eyes, but beneath the fear was something else now. A strange warmth moving through her chest. Not painful, not dangerous, almost comforting. Lucian noticed it too. The Moonveil seal only awakened under one condition: fate recognition. His wolf had not simply reacted to Clara. It had bonded to her. The realization struck harder than any battlefield wound Lucian had ever endured. Because if the royal court discovered the truth, Clara would become the center of every political war in the Northern Territories by sunrise. Suddenly voices echoed from the far corridor leading toward the ballroom. Angry voices. Noble voices. "The king cannot humiliate royal bloodlines for a servant." The entire court witnessed it. "This is madness." Clara's face paled instantly. Lucian moved without hesitation, stepping directly in front of her just as several members of the royal council entered the corridor. Princess Vivienne stood among them, her silver gown sweeping across the marble floor as fury burned beneath her carefully controlled expression. High Seer Evelyn followed behind the group in silence. The moment the council members saw Clara standing beside Lucian beneath the moonlight, tension flooded the corridor. Then one councilman noticed the glowing marks against Clara's skin. His eyes widened in horror. "Moonveil," he whispered. The word spread instantly among the nobles like poison. Clara instinctively stepped backward, but Lucian remained firmly between her and the crowd. "Your Majesty," one older lord began carefully. "If that girl truly carries Moonveil blood, she cannot remain inside the royal court." Clara's heartbeat thundered painfully in her ears. "Why?" she asked softly before she could stop herself. No one answered immediately. Finally, Princess Vivienne spoke coldly. "Because Moonveil wolves destroyed kingdoms." Clara stared at her in shock. "That is not true," Lucian said sharply. Silence crashed through the corridor. Vivienne lifted her chin. "History says otherwise." "History lies." The dangerous edge in Lucian's voice made several nobles visibly stiffen. Clara looked up at him in surprise. This was the first time she had seen genuine anger break through his calm mask. One councilman cleared his throat nervously. "Your Majesty, regardless of the past, the court cannot allow rumors of a Moonveil Omega becoming close to the throne." Close to the throne. Clara felt sick hearing the words spoken aloud. She opened her mouth to deny everything, but Lucien spoke first. She stays under my protection. Every noble in the corridor fell silent again. Princess Vivian's expression hardened completely now. You would place a servant above the royal alliances gathered tonight. Lucien's silver eyes turned ice cold. I would place my judgment above your opinion. Clara's breath caught. The pressure in the corridor thickened instantly as Lucien's alpha aura rolled through the hallway like an approaching storm. Even the nobles lowered their eyes slightly beneath it. Enough, he said quietly. Nobody argued after that. Because this was not merely a king speaking anymore. This was the Alpha King, the ruler every pack feared challenging. Slowly, the nobles began retreating down the corridor again, though the hatred in several princesses' eyes lingered on Clara before they disappeared. Only Evelyn remained behind. The old oracle studied Clara silently for several long seconds before speaking. The seal awakened earlier than expected. Clara blinked nervously. Expected? Evelyn looked toward Lucien first. You should tell her the truth soon. A muscle tightened in Lucien's jaw. Not tonight. The oracle nodded once before turning away. Then pray the court does not discover the rest before dawn. Clara's stomach twisted instantly. Discover what? But Evelyn was already walking away. Silence returned once more beneath the silver moonlight. Clara slowly turned toward Lucien, fear and confusion filling her eyes now. What is she talking about? Lucien looked at her for a long moment without answering. Then finally, quietly, he said the words that shattered what remained of Clara's world. Your mother did not die from fever. The world seemed to tilt beneath Clara's feet. Cold air swept through the balcony arches, carrying snowflakes into the corridor, but she barely felt them anymore. Her mother did not die from fever. The words echoed painfully inside her chest while Lucien watched the shock spread across her face. What do you mean? Clara whispered. Her voice sounded smaller now. Fragile. Lucien looked toward the empty corridor before answering, as if even the palace walls could not be trusted. Your mother was hunted by members of the royal court. Clara stared at him in disbelief. No, I wish I was wrong. Why would they hunt her? Lucien's jaw tightened slightly. Because Rosalind Whitmore was one of the last true Moonvale wolves. Clara shook her head immediately. My mother was a servant. No, Lucien said quietly. She was hiding. The truth struck Clara harder than she expected. Tiny memories returned one after another like broken glass rising from deep water. Her mother refusing to let Clara leave the servant quarters during royal gatherings. The fear in her eyes whenever nobles visited the palace. The way she always locked the doors at night. Clara had thought it was caution. Now she realized it had been survival. When I was a child, Lucien continued softly, the court feared Moonvale wolves because their bonds could influence alpha instincts. Clara frowned through the panic building inside her. Influence. Soothe rage. Strengthen loyalty. Calm violent wolves. Lucien's silver eyes darkened slightly. Kings feared anyone capable of affecting power so deeply. Clara wrapped her arms around herself tightly. So they erased them. Lucien did not answer. He did not need to. Silence became confirmation. Snow drifted softly through the open balcony behind them while thunder rolled across distant mountains. Clara suddenly felt unbearably small standing inside Blackthorn Palace. Everything she believed about herself was collapsing piece by piece. Then why am I still alive? She asked quietly. Lucien looked directly at her. Because someone protected you. Clara blinked slowly. Who? Before Lucien could answer, another voice spoke from behind them. Your mother gave up everything to keep you hidden. Clara spun around instantly. High Seer Evelyn stood near the corridor entrance once more, her silver robes moving gently in the winter draft. In her hands rested an old wooden box carved with crescent moons. Clara's heartbeat quickened again. Evelyn approached slowly before holding the box toward her. Rosalind left this behind the night she disappeared. Clara stared at it with trembling hands. Disappeared? Your mother ran when the court discovered your existence, Evelyn said softly. Moonvale children were forbidden after the blood purges. Clara felt sick hearing the words. Blood purges. Forbidden children. None of it sounded real. Yet somewhere deep inside her, she already knew it was true. Evelyn opened the box carefully. Inside rested a folded silver cloak pin and an old photograph faded by time. Clara slowly picked it up. Her breath caught instantly. The woman smiling back at her from the photograph looked exactly like the mother she remembered. But beside her stood a man Clara had never seen before. Tall, dark-haired, silver-eyed. Her hands began shaking violently now, because she recognized those eyes. Lucien stepped closer beside her. That man, Clara whispered weakly. Who is he? Neither Lucien nor Evelyn answered immediately. The silence terrified her more than words ever could. Finally, Evelyn spoke gently. The former Alpha King. Clara's knees nearly gave out beneath her. Lucien caught her arm immediately before she collapsed onto the marble floor. The photograph trembled in Clara's hand as understanding slowly spread across her face. No, she whispered again. No, that cannot be true. But deep down, her wolf already knew. The silver eyes, the Moonveil seal, the impossible bond. Clara Whitmore was not merely a servant hidden in the palace. She carried royal blood. The ballroom fell silent the moment Lucien Blackthorne returned with Clara beside him. 100 princesses stood beneath the crystal chandeliers in gowns of silver, gold, and sapphire, yet none of them drew the attention of the room anymore. Every eye followed the Omega servant walking beside the Alpha King. Clara's heart pounded so hard she thought the entire court might hear it. The silver markings along her collarbone had faded beneath the cloak Evelyn wrapped around her moments earlier, but she could still feel their warmth beneath her skin. Everything had changed within a single night. The girl who entered the ballroom, carrying wine trays, no longer existed. Yet Clara still felt like her. Frightened, overwhelmed, completely unprepared for the weight of hundreds of noble eyes watching her every step. Whispering followed them immediately. That is her. The hidden Moonveil. The king brought her back publicly. Impossible. Lucien ignored every voice. His presence alone parted the ballroom crowd as he guided Clara toward the center of the marble floor beneath the towering moon crest of Blackthorn Palace. The orchestra had stopped playing entirely now. Even the servants stood frozen along the walls. Princess Vivienne stepped forward first, fury barely concealed beneath her elegant smile. Your Majesty, she said carefully. Surely the court deserves an explanation before this humiliation continues. Clara instinctively lowered her gaze again. Humiliation. The word struck sharply because part of her still believed she did not belong here. Lucien noticed instantly. His silver eyes darkened slightly before he addressed the ballroom. Tonight, he said calmly, every royal family gathered here expected me to choose a political alliance. His voice echoed through the silent hall with effortless authority. A princess, a bloodline, a throne. Several nobles straightened nervously beneath his gaze. Lucien turned slightly toward Clara then, and the entire ballroom seemed to stop breathing again. Instead, he continued quietly, my wolf chose truth. Clara's breath caught painfully. She looked up at him in shock. Lucien stepped closer until only inches separated them beneath the chandeliers. This woman was hidden from the kingdom because others feared what she carried. His eyes swept across the nobles sharply now. But I will not allow fear to decide the future of this throne again. Princess Vivienne's composure finally cracked. She is an Omega servant. Lucien's gaze snapped toward her instantly. The pressure of his alpha aura flooded the ballroom so powerfully that several nobles instinctively stepped backward. No, he said coldly. She is Clara Whitmore of the Moonveil line. Silence crashed across the hall. Clara's pulse thundered in her ears. Hearing her true name spoken aloud before the kingdom felt unreal. Dangerous. Beautiful. Then Lucien did something no one expected. Slowly, deliberately, the Alpha King lowered himself onto one knee before her. Gasps echoed across the ballroom. Several princesses looked horrified. Clara herself nearly stopped breathing entirely. Kings did not kneel. Not before servants. Not before anyone. Yet Lucien Blackthorne looked up at her beneath the silver chandelier light as though there was no one else in the world worth seeing. I spent years believing power came from fear, he said quietly enough that only the ballroom silence carried his words. Then tonight, I watched an Omega servant tremble beneath the cruelty of this court and still remain kind. Clara's eyes burned suddenly. Lucien, his hand gently took hers before she could pull away. Warmth rushed through her chest instantly, stronger now than before. Around them, the chandeliers flickered softly as moonlight poured through the palace windows. I do not care about crowns, Lucien said, or alliances, or the approval of nobles too afraid to see truth standing before them. His silver eyes softened for the first time that night. I choose you. Clara felt tears gather before she could stop them. Not from fear anymore. From the overwhelming realization that someone had finally seen her. Not as weak. Not as invisible. But worthy. Slowly, Shakily, Clara tightened her fingers around his hand. The moment she did, the moon crest above the ballroom ceiling glowed faintly silver beneath the chandeliers. A collective gasp swept through the court. The bond had sealed. And while 100 princesses stood frozen beneath the palace lights, the Alpha King chose the only girl everyone else failed to see.